I now call to order the November 28th, 2023 regular meeting of Wellington Board of Trustees, time being 6:32 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, make it a roll call, please.
Trustee Daly.
Present.
Trustee Gator.
Here.
Trustee Mason.
Here.
Trustee Wiegand.
Here.
Trustee Teets.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald. Mayor Shosse.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda this evening? No. Are there any conflicts of interest on the agenda this evening? No. All right, next we will proceed to public comment. Members wishing to speak can speak on non-agenda items. Please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and then sign in on the sheet. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Okay, no public comment. I will now close the regular meeting and open the Liquor License Authority Board, time being 6:33 p.m. Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title of C1?
Certainly, Mayor Shosse. C1, Avuncular Bob's Tea Bar Inn and Brew Pub, Hotel and Restaurant City License Renewal.
Perfect. And then will you
I'm just going to present from my chair this evening in the interest of time, Mayor Shosse. One moment, please. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Shosse, Trustees, Ethan Muhs, Town Clerk. Avuncular Bob's Tea Bar Inn and Brew Pub Operations LLC has submitted their annual renewal for the Hotel and Restaurant City Liquor License Renewal. A review of the application found the establishment is in good standing with the Colorado Secretary of State. The establishment is current with sales tax, and the Larimer County Sheriff's Office reported no issues directly related to the establishment's liquor license. The establishment has legal possession of the premise, and there were no issues or concerns during a visual inspection of the premise. There was the one noted discrepancy with the food. Let me just pull up the report here. The food service license expiration. My understanding is that the establishment has applied for a renewal. They simply don't have the paperwork from the state indicating that it's current, and that they will forward it to us once they've received that paperwork. I'm happy to take any other questions that you may have.
Trustee Gator?
Just wanted to say thank you to Sergeant Cherry, and if you could share with your staff, it's great when you just put a note in there, even if it's just, hey, we didn't find anything. I'm not questioning, so just appreciate you guys. The way you do that now versus what it was before is awesome, so just thank you very much for that, but no other questions.
Thank you.
I just want to verify that there was a license to operate. There is one currently, just not on the premise.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
That they've applied for it and reported no issues associated with the renewal other than the receipt of paperwork.
Awesome. Thank you.
Unless Sergeant Cherry has any information to the contrary.
Just going through my email, the manager did send me the most current license to operate, which is good and through December 31st of 2024. So they're current now.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public on this item? No. Do I hear a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor license renewal for Avuncular Bob's Tea Bar Inn and Brew Pub Hotel and Restaurant City license renewal.
Second.
Clerk, make it a roll call, please.
Trustee Gator?
Yes.
Trustee Daly?
Yes.
Trustee Mason?
Yes.
Trustee Teets?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Mayor Shosse?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously and the license renewal is approved.
Thank you. I now close the Liquor Licensing Authority Board and reopen the regular meeting, time being 6:36 p.m. Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title of the items on the consent agenda?
Item D1, November 14, 2023, regular meeting minutes. Item D2, resolution number 48-2023, a resolution of the town of Wellington, Colorado, authorizing the temporary closure of portions of State Highway 1, Cleveland Avenue.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Clerk, make a roll call, please.
Certainly, Mayor Shosse. Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Teets,
Yes.
Trustee Mason,
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
Trustee Daly,
Yes.
Mayor Shosse.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously and the consent agenda is approved.
thank you. All right, next we'll move on to action items. Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title of item E1?
Item E1, ordinance number 10-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, making adjustments to utility rates.
Thank you. And then Ms. Meagan Smith, Deputy Director of Public Works, and will be presenting to us on this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Trustees. Meagan Smith, Deputy Director of Public Works. If I can have about 15 seconds standing up here in front of you to get my login.
Somebody start the Wheel of Fortune music.
I know. I apologize.
You're good.
It dawned on me right before you said my item that I was not logged into Zoom. Mr. Muhs, if you could promote me, thank you. Okay, thank you. Again, Meagan Smith, to restart, Deputy Director of Public Works. Thank you this evening. You have before you this evening 2 ordinances that I'm going to present similarly to the previous regular meeting on November 14th, where I do have the background material for both ordinances and discussion material included in the one description. Just as a little bit of an agenda, we will go through some background, review the proposed 24 water and wastewater usage rates and fees, discuss the impacts to the modeled fund impacts for the financial plans for both funds, and then reviewing some of those potential opportunities that we had touched on at our previous presentation. I did just want to remind for those in the audience or listening at home, this is the 3rd presentation that we brought to the board related to updated water and wastewater usage rates and capital investment fees. First in a special work session in late October, and then again at a regular meeting on November 14th. So just to remind everybody, we did embark in late spring of 2022 on a comprehensive rate and fee study at the direction of the Board of Trustees, bringing on board Raftellus, a local consulting firm out of Denver that really specializes nationwide in utility rates and studies. Raftellus came in and helped us to facilitate and engage a roundtable citizen group in this rate setting process in order to help us kind of set the values and directions for how we were looking to structure our utility rates moving forward. That did put a lot of emphasis on the structure that was finally then adopted in late 2022 and is in effect today. The structure is quite different than what had been previously in place, both for water and wastewater, previous to 2023. As we have kind of somewhat in the interest of time and trying to get to the end, that went fast. That did go really fast. Don't touch the mouse pad. I was just trying to, okay, good, it's not on the way. And those rate structures did include both the recommendations from the roundtable as well as the best practices and recommendations provided by Raftellus through that study process. So on the next couple of slides, you'll have just our existing 2023 rates and fees. So our residential and commercial and irrigation water base rates and fees, followed by our wastewater base rate and fee and our current capital investment fees listed through residential as well as commercial. Do keep in mind that the irrigation capital investment fee is only for water. There's not a wastewater capital investment fee associated with an irrigation only tap. And moving on to then the proposed rates and impact fees. So what you had seen in, I'm going to try and move this, or maybe you're in charge of being able to move that. You can't.
Do you want me to do the
I might be able to do it. To move the, that's okay. Just so it's not in the way. There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that. So the rates and fees that you see in these tables are this what was presented on November 4th. So these rates are in line with the recommendations, again, that had came out of that REFTELA study, looking at the financial planning effort of the utility and setting those rates in order to make sure that we are covering the cost of operations and making sure that we're splitting those costs and needs across both new development, making sure they're paying their own way to fund into our system, as well as current operations needed for both water and wastewater. Those recommendations did come with a 5% recommended annual increase for 5 years for both the water and wastewater usage rates. And there was a 4% increase recommended at that time for capital investment fees. At the direction of the board from our work session, staff did dive further into current state of affairs in construction, mainly looking into various construction indices, specifically a couple here in Colorado, including a CDOT construction indices that did support that costs have increased adequately enough to support an additional 1% increase on those capital investment fees. So these numbers do reflect both a 5% increase for rates as well as a 5% increase to the capital investment fees for both water and wastewater. Now I did, from this presentation, I did eliminate the full detailed bill impacts, but I wanted to leave in kind of the summary table that highlighted what some of the bill impacts could be anticipated for our customers. Various residential customer at the top, kind of an average residential use for both winter and summer, as well as looking at two different commercial industry types, as well as an HOA. There can be some significant increases in there depending upon the magnitude of usage of these customers. And this bill summary does include both water and wastewater in that. Now, we did have a request at the last presentation to try and review in a little bit more detail and bring forward some of the impacts with the most recent budget updates, as that's been kind of a fluid process, rapidly coming to a close, but there were changes up and through the November 14th presentation that hadn't been embedded and hadn't been able to tie together the latest budget information with the water and wastewater rate model efforts. So we did, I worked with Mr. Rhoads last week. We did make sure that those models tied out and that we could kind of produce some updated numbers for you. So just as a reminder, the final report that came from REFTELA that had been included in previous packets did include those 5-year financial plans. It did show in those financial plans, it did show the need for an outside loan to the water fund. It showed those increasing both usage rates and capital investment fees. And it did also show that deficit spending, three years worth of deficit spending while we were coming out of finishing up the construction projects mainly. We reviewed this, but I have updated it a little bit. We have had some significant fund impacts, unforeseen fund impacts. Best laid plans can always change. That's why these budgets take place every year. Some of the most significant fund impacts to both the water and wastewater fund are outlined here. Some of the biggest ones being related to the North Pooter increase in the North Pooter invoice for our raw water lease agreement. A significant reduction in expected building permits, expected growth projections for the town for 2024. That is a very big impact on our planning. There was the paying off of 2 loans, the defeasance of 1 loan and then paying off early one of our loans in the wastewater fund before securing that additional SRF loan that was not accounted for in the rate model previously. So when we embed that in, and then of course there's a very significant impact to the wastewater fund with that reduction in anticipated growth. Those are actually all the same that you have seen in previous slides. With the update to, I believe the last time you saw this, we had a higher number of anticipated building permits for 2024. Those numbers have been updated here. So that did increase the shortfall in that line item as well. Just as a reminder, as to just kind of speak to and think about where our highest, most significant impacts to both funds lie. We have seen in the water fund that lease agreement arrangement has been a big driving force, and the rapidly increasing cost of that to the organization. We've seen a 300% increase in that unit cost since 2017. And just for comparison, I added this in here. As you all know, we had a very reduced rate revenue in 2023 due to lower water usage. That does translate to a lower than anticipated or lower than originally budgeted invoice for that raw water lease agreement. But just for comparison, we used about 686 acre feet through that lease agreement in 2023. The last time we used that low of an amount was 2015. And you can see there that price difference for the same volume of water. So that's really, it is a driving force. We do also have, of course, the loan payments in both the water and the wastewater fund. That loan payment is definitely the most significant impact ongoing cost to the wastewater fund for sure. So we did include, and I didn't include them in my slides, though you do have them in your packet, the updated water and wastewater modeled financial plans. They are based on all the information that you had seen through the draft budget presentation on November 14th. There could be some very minor changes that happen after, before we come back on December 12th, but it would be pretty minor. I did kind of summarize what those financial plans are showing. It does capture a $6 million intra-fund loan that you can see in those plans in the water fund and we have embedded a repayment schedule already, a 10-year repayment schedule effective beginning in 2025, if I'm not mistaken. It does show also the general fund transfers that the board has already approved for both 2023 and 2024. I will also say that at this point, the modeling effort based on recommendations from the board also includes an assumed general fund transfer to both the water and wastewater fund in 2025. That's not something that's up for approval at the moment. It's several years out, but for our efforts and per the recommendation of the board, that is included in that as well. We are showing, again, a combined deficit spending for the water fund for 2024 through 2027, reaching a negative fund balance of $755,000 at its lowest point. That fund balance begins turning around in 2028, becoming positive in 2029. And then similar picture in the wastewater fund. We are seeing a fewer years of combined deficit spending just through 24 and 25, with that negative combined fund balance in years 25 and 6, reaching a low of negative 1.54 million. I believe the last time we were here in front of you, those numbers were closer to 2.5 million. So the general fund transfers had a significant impact on buoying that up. And that fund balance begins turning around in 26, becoming positive in 27. So we right side up pretty quickly for that fund. I did want to review and then also highlight some of the questions that I had received from the board at the last presentation that didn't get addressed necessarily in your packet material, but I do have some information for you. I did want to highlight for sure that the board has approved those general fund transfers in 23 and 24. And again, that the 25 and the modeling effort, the 25 is also reflecting a transfer to both funds. We are in ongoing contract negotiations with North Poudre. Those are moving forward. There is always an opportunity if needed for retiming of capital projects, and perhaps we see some unanticipated growth or maybe some additional commercial growth that hasn't been anticipated. I will say the rate modeling effort doesn't really capture anticipated commercial growth. It does to a very slight extent, but it's very conservative in that estimate. Just kind of basing it on historical of what we've seen, but on the very conservative end, not wanting to overestimate revenues that may come from that. So that's always an opportunity that we could see additional funding. And to address just to kind of review a couple of the questions that I received at the last board meeting, there was a question about considerations for additional decreases. I did want to just highlight a couple of things. The one thing that hadn't been highlighted before, so in the iteration of the budget that you saw from November 14th to whatever the date was for the previous presentation. There had already been a couple of cuts in both the water and wastewater operations fund on the professional development line. They'd been reduced by about $2,100 each. Understanding that oftentimes we're not spending that entire budget. So we'll tighten up the belt for sure for next year. I also did want to highlight too, in the both the operations funds. So in the water operations fund, you see about a $700,000 increase from 2023 to 2024. But all of that $700,000 can be captured in that one line item for our raw water lease agreement. That increase from 23 to 24 is $700,000. And then in our wastewater operations budget, I see an increase of approximately $687,000 from 23 to 24. And the bulk of that is in an estimate of an additional electricity needed for the twice expanded facility. So we have that increasing by about $100,000. That is an estimate at this point. And then the remaining of it is in the difference in the loan payment and that, I'm just spacing on the word, just the repayment schedule and how that pans out from last year through to this year. So that's $630,000 of that $687,000. So fundamentally, there's been very minimal change in operations budgets between 23 and 24, even with additional cost increases across the board for electricity, gas, propane, all of that. There was a question brought forward about if there was an opportunity for additional funding, which the board has fully supported. So you guys have already made that decision, which helps a great deal. As you can see, if only in the wastewater fund, bringing that fund balance back up so quickly. Another additional funding opportunity, staff has been very successful, as Trustee Kenny has pointed out a few times, excuse me. I knew I was going to do that. We've been very successful in securing grants across the organization, both for the water and in the wastewater fund. We have the earmark grant dollars for the Viewpoint lift station that's offsetting that. We are bringing forward a grant opportunity either in December or January for a grant opportunity for the water fund that we're asking for as much as $500,000. So we are continuing to pursue all of those available grant funds. I will say just the reality is that there seems to be a whole lot more available for transportation and drainage related to grant funding opportunities than necessarily utilities, but we are pursuing what we can and what we see available for sure. There was a request from Trustee Gator was asking about if we could look at seeing at what point in the future that loan expense transfers from being paid from either operations to capital funds. I will say and you can see that in the financial plans that are in your packet, that those funds are already being modeled as captured out of the capital fund entirely. So both loan payments in both the water fund and the wastewater fund are currently modeled in the capital fund expenditures entirely. And then there was also a question about bringing forward any estimates about the impacts of wage increases to those wages specific that the water fund and the sewer fund, wastewater fund help offset. And I did go in and look at, with the help of our human resources director, the impact of that 3% merit portion that's in the discussion at the moment. And that impact and this is across the board, so across all wages, both existing those positions that are fully funded by those funds and more of the indirect positions that get funded as well. That's about a $27,000 impact to the water fund and about a $25,000 impact to the wastewater fund. So they're hovering about 0.5% of the total operations budgets. And with those questions answered, I would like to open up to field any of your questions at this time.
Trustee Mason.
I don't think I've got a lot of questions here. I'll just start with, a couple of things that I said last time we were here. I did want to thank staff for getting the additional 1% on the impact fees, bringing that from 4% to 5%. And I look forward to us continuing to work on grants and that sort of thing, as well as the 1983 agreement renegotiations. I think there's a lot of promising things we've got coming up there, but it is, obviously rate increases are a tough pill to swallow for folks, but you know, at the end of the day, this board needs to be good financial stewards for the town, and these funds need to be able to pay for themselves. So at this point, certainly I am in support of the rate increase. We need to get these offset and get them back into a spot where they're going to be able to take care of themselves. So.
Thank you. Trustee Daly.
Going back to the presentation, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very comprehensive. So going back to, I do want to just point out and maybe elaborate on a couple of items that jumped out at me. And those are specifically related to the 2022 rate and fee study that we did with Raftalis. And for anybody who's listening who's not aware of it, the group of residents that came together and worked and understood and spent many, many, many hours with staff understanding the model, the study, and really creating the values in which we bill for our utilities. And I really respect the fact that that came from a resident group with as much data as possible and with professional assistance for people who work in this field and do rate and fee studies. Obviously, all of our staff works in this field, but specific to rate and fee studies. And the fact that the decisions, the general values are, you know, you have to pay for the cost to deliver the water. And whether it's residential or commercial or multifamily type things, and they separated them out to be the most fair across the board. And I really appreciate that. A lot of the effects of that for previous rate adjustments brought a lot of the rates more in tune and in line, and also set us up for a model that'll be more consistent in the future. It's going to not jump and change in how the function and structure of the billing significantly. And we can, you know, rely on very small percentage increases. The other part that was in the presentation that I want to highlight, and I think is really important to understand too, are those the transfers of funds. It's shown as grants into, and there's millions of dollars over multiple years, the maximum legally possible that the board is already committed to, or, you know, it's planning for in the future to offset any additional more costs that would be given to utility bills. So those millions that we're reallocating at the maximum legal amount in order to not have to increase bills more than what's proposed here. So those are the two things that jumped out at me that aren't really obvious when you talk about increasing rates. So, but I appreciate that the whole picture was put into the presentation, so we have that whole view. But again, I also live and pay these bills, so rate increases are always rough to consider. But I really appreciate the presentation. No questions though. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Gitter.
Yes, I did have a couple questions. So in the combined funds within the water fund, so when we look at the combined, let me get to the right page here. So I'm looking at the operational fund. It's going to be page, I think, 53. So that shows like the capital and operating together. Does that incorporate into the total fund balance the amounts from the raw water fees? Is that included in that number? Is the raw water portion of the fund also included in those numbers?
No.
Okay, so that is pulled out separately. Okay, correct. Perfect. Thank you. The other thing I had a question on is in the presentation. Let me get back to the page. The page 42, it says financial projections include a 4.5 million outside loan to water fund. Where is that reflected? Because I didn't see that in the numbers on below. So I was trying to understand where that comes in and the costs associated with that.
That was based on the original 5-year financial plan that came from Raftalis. So that fund, that $4.5 million outside loan has been replaced now with a $6 million intra-fund loan.
Got it.
So
okay.
The point of highlighting that was just ensuring that even at that point in middle to late 2022, there was already awareness that we would need a loan to cover the gap in cost between the loan amount and the construction amount of the water plant.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, if you're, you wouldn't find a 4.5 number.
That's why I was trying to understand. I was like, I know I see the 6. And then the other question I had, is there a reason that we've got the repayment to the raw water fund coming out of the operational fund cash flow?
That would be a question better, unfortunately, answered by Mr. Rhoads, who I'm afraid is not able to be on the phone tonight.
Okay.
He helped generate, that process.
Okay.
And it is a question worth investigating.
Okay.
For sure.
Just because, I mean, all the other loans are being paid out of the capital investment, but then the interfund loan, which is going to the capital side, so it would make sense that needs to be repaid out of the capital side. So that was just something that I had a question about. Okay. I think those are the only questions I had. Again, my concerns to the board are the same as I've had before. The first thing you do when you're in a hole is you stop digging. My concern is we talk about in 2025, we're going to go $593,000 in the hole. Sorry, 2026 in the water fund. Typically, when you know that your business or organization is headed to the hole, you don't keep making it worse and increasing expenses. Because what happens when you hit the point where we're 593,000 in the water and then 700,000, that's typically in organizations where jobs start going away. Like, that's a bad situation to be in. We have the opportunity. Thankfully, we have good financial information that's been provided to us that we've been lacking for several years. But my concern is as we continue to increase and go down that road, we're just going to make it worse for us when we actually get to 26. And potentially we can cut our way out of it with CIPs and things like that. But I really don't want to be at 26 and realize we can't cut enough CIPs to keep from running out of money, because when there's no money in the bank account, how do we pay North Poudre for water? How do we pay for the chemicals needed to treat the water? How do we pay for the employees that we need to run the plant? Our employees are not going to sit here and just say, hey, it's all good, I'll take an IOU for 3 years. They need to be paid. And so I am concerned that we need to look at, okay, just really looking, I appreciate the cuts that we've done so far. I appreciate the numbers from staff on what are the impacts of the merit and COLA, so we actually can have some concrete numbers. No, they're not huge numbers. But the problem is every number we continue to increase, again, those increases don't just stay this year. Those are this year and next year and the year after that. And they just continue rising as expenses. If we know that we are running out of money in the water fund, it's great. If we can renegotiate with North Poudre and we get a great contract, that solves almost all of our problems. On the sewer plant, we don't have a magic bullet to solve that problem. There's no contract to renegotiate. That is a debt that we have to pay. And so my concern is that we need to figure out how we're going to address that. And the first thing that for me is stop spending more money. Don't add positions, don't increase wages. So that's kind of my process. And the answer is not continue. I understand we need to raise the rates, but it needs to be, we need to raise the rates and we need to hold things on our end and say, hey, we're keeping expenses flat. We're not giving ourselves raises. We're not bringing new positions. We're going to make this work on our end. We're pursuing the grants. So unless we're willing to say on our end, hey, we're going to put a pause on things, we're going to hold positions, we're not going to be giving raises and things like that until we can get these finances sorted out, I'm not going to support saying we'll just put it on the residents, because what's going to happen is going to be a 5% this year, then a 7% or 8% or 9% or 10%. And it's just going to keep getting passed on to the residents. And it's not just going to be the amount we have today. It's going to be the amount we have today plus whatever increases we put in this year. So that's kind of where I stand. If we're willing to commit on our end to say we're going to hold things back, I appreciate we've done in other areas, but I have a major concern when we're giving ourselves raises and at the same time saying, well, we got to charge our residents more money because we're about to, and we know we're about to run out of money in the next 3 years.
Thank you. Trustee Teets.
So I understand the gratefulness and thankfulness. I was able to actually sit and Trustee Meagan and I were to have an in-depth, thank you for staying much longer than the hour scheduled, conversation and understanding of where we are with the water, answering a whole bunch of questions. This is something that I've been a little more interested in than your average person, just because I find it fascinating that someone controls how much water you can release, and you have to pay additional if you want to buy water from somewhere else and put it in your pond that you think you own, but you don't actually own. So my reserve comes in. I'm still seeing a difference on the commercial side versus residential side of about $90. So if you look at 25,000 gallons of usage from commercial side, and you look at that same usage on the residential side, residents are paying about $90 more for 25,000 gallons of water. That's without adding in fees, metering, reading, or anything like that. That's just the base rate and the cost of water. So that's a concern of mine. The other concern of mine is the fact that 2022 to 2024, we had a negative $7.3 million impact. If you add up the significant fund impacts that you had stated from page 43, $7.3 million off budget from 22 to 24. It's not a fun thing to look at on total impact. I agree also the 3% merit that you were talking about, the 27,000 to water, 25 to wastewater. Did that include the other 3% COLA?
No.
So it would that be an additional 3% that was affected by that?
So that was just estimating the merit increase, the merit pool. And I made that guess just out of what I'd heard from the board thus far was a pretty strong support for COLA. And I know that there's going to be a further wage and budget discussion as part of the presentation that'll come on December 12th. So I might not be the best person to answer all of your wage questions.
Got it. So then I could classify if it's 3% COLA and 3% merit, it's 6%. And that would take that 27 to what?
50 to 54. Yeah.
So 54,000 affecting the water and then 50,000 affecting wastewater. So that's $104,000 that affects those two funds. That's a little different than the 27,000 and 25,000. Were there any infrastructure items placed on hold through when you guys were looking at the cuts from the water and wastewater to balance this out? Was there any actual infrastructure items cut to assist with keeping the budget low?
We have not. So the one thing that could be considered, or there's a couple of things that can still be considered and could still take acted upon in 2024. That decision wouldn't have to be made today, or through this budget process even. There is, again, the Water Smart grant that we're bringing forward either in December or January. If we are not successful in the award for that grant, and actually even if we are successful, that grant would be to go to pay for the additional AMI infrastructure, networking and infrastructure capital improvement line. And it doesn't look like that grant funding would come through until the very end of 2024. So likely that entire capital improvement project would shift back a whole year. That capital improvement project also would be spread out to much smaller amounts. That was in the description in that in the project capital improvement plan. That if we were not awarded the grant, then we will be revisiting that project entirely as to how the best laid plan to pay for that over probably further years. So that's one in the water fund. In the wastewater fund, there is been continued conversation around the grant that we have for the Viewpoint Lift Station project. Depending on the timing that's needed to adhere to the award requirements. And from our understanding, it's a little bit more flexible in timeline than what we knew 4 months ago, 3 months ago even. So there's definitely a possibility that entire project could shift back if needed as well. And that was where kind of the bullet point comes from, the ability for retiming of capital projects if needed.
Got it.
So we do have some flexibility there. And so no, none of that has been shifted. All of that is reflected as is and what you see in the financial plans.
Okay. So it could we could see a greater decrease if they do shift. We would see more of a decrease. I think the other thing that I would like addressed, because this resident had reached out to me specifically, and I had asked them to send their questions and concerns over to you guys. This is an email that we had received from Mr. Bill Emery. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right. Do you have any additional information related to the HOA potable versus non-potable system available over on the east side of the interstate? It's my understanding that they have a tie-in available to a non-pot system, and we are using potable water to water a greenbelt. If that were to shift, does that have any effect on the cost of water infrastructure? Is there any way that having this switch over to a non-pot system, if available? I guess I'll read his question. Am I correct in stating that we have a water shortage and that the town of Wellington has enforced water restrictions on homeowners watering lawns?
We have a water production limitation.
Got it. And that's what I assumed, but it's better coming in. Yes. So, and it's so not so much a water shortage. It's the fact that we have the water. We just can't process it now because of our water plant. Got it. And it says, well, and I think that was really two questions. So, but it says, if the question above is yes, why is the town of Wellington permitting the use of potable water on public grass when there is a non-potable water system set up to water that area with non-potable water? Do you know the area that's being referred to?
I do.
Okay. So, and if this is something I can get his answered from you, because it's probably coming from you is more professional than me trying to explain all of it. I think what they're trying to understand, and what I, after receiving this email, I'm trying to understand is if that system were switched over to a non-pot system, would it mean less cost to the town of Wellington residents, as that water would not be coming out of our processed water?
I'm not prepared to give an answer off the cuff to that email, as I received it about 4 o'clock today.
Right. Got it. Yep. So same. I saw just a brief of it. Is there a possibility that this would affect anything that has to do with rate changes? Is there that much of a usage over there that it would affect anything that we were making a decision on this evening?
I have not investigated the water usage out of their HOA account in recent times.
Okay.
The only thing I can say is reduced usage will equate to reduced revenue. I mean,
got it.
But as far as reducing an impact to infrastructure needs, I'm not in a position to comment on that right now.
Okay, perfect. I hope that addresses some of his questions. If he has additional ones, I do encourage him to reach out to have those questions additionally answered. Other than that, I am in the same situation where I think approving $104,000 worth of wage increases that do in fact affect our water wastewater, I would have an issue approving the water rate adjustment now without delving deeper and knowing that we can adjust more things to possibly decrease this water rate burden. I know we're looking at the possibility of 3 years before we consider not being able to pay our town of Wellington water bill. That's concerning. I understand the rates need to go up. I just would love to find a more creative way of being able to do so, where, I mean, we've had people email asking to purchase water shares of our excessive water shares. There has to be additional that we can do where this rate doesn't change or affect our residents. That's where I am right now.
Trustee Wiegand.
First off, I appreciate meeting with you, Megan, and Ms. Garcia. That was a great meeting. I learned a lot. And yeah, it's very interesting being from Illinois, where we got our rain naturally from the sky. This is completely different here. So, you know, I know we have, you know, so many things right now that are out of our control. And I know we're going to have to make some hard decisions here. You know, rain, we don't know how much rain we're going to get. That directly impacts our income that we get off of that. Building permits, we have no idea. You know, you got inflation, you got interest rates, everything that's affecting us. So many things that are out of our control. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I've always tried to live by is, you know, you pray for the best, but you always plan for the worst on this. So, I mean, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. And that's where our leadership here comes really into the forefront, and appreciate you guys. I think you've done a good job, but now it's going to be even harder yet because again, you know, I agree with Trustee Gator over there. We're going to have to make some hard decisions. You know, if we're expecting our citizens here to take major increase, you know, they're already hit with real estate taxes. You know, they're hit with the water rates, insurance rates, which I directly see all the time, are huge out there right now. I mean, people are just getting hit right and left. And again, this is where it takes leadership from our part to say, you know, we ain't expecting you guys to do anything more than we're expecting to do ourselves. And if it comes to giving up my stipends or stipends that I get, I'm willing to do that. But, you know, anything to help this situation. But again, I think we have to lead by example on this one here. And I know we're going to need to do this. You know, we're in between a rock and a hard place, you know, with the water rates. And that was kind of interesting seeing what the rates were back in 2017, 2018, whatever, compared to what they are now. And is it going to stop? I know you're working on it real hard, and I appreciate what you're doing. And at first I was pretty much saying, why in the heck would you even think about giving up water shares? But it was kind of interesting knowing that that was what we did back in '84 to get our current projects going or program going. So again, I was glad to hear that and to get some of the background on that. But again, you know, if that comes through, that's going to help us out, but we don't know if it's going to come through. You know, we don't know if we're going to have a major rain this kind, you know, coming year, or we don't know if they're going to jack up interest rates more again, which are going to kill building. I mean, I'm from the town in the Midwest where the same type of situation bankrupted a lot of builders. Don't want to see it happen here. You know, we got to be planned for what's best for the people here. So again, we got to make some hard decisions. I think we do got to go with the rate increase, but we have to do that in conjunction with what we're doing with our budget too. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, spending a good amount of time on this and answering all the questions for the board that they had at the last meeting. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, this was built into the modeling. We knew this was going to come. It's going to come again next year and the year after that. It's part of what was modeled, what was approved by the roundtable, brought to us, and it's what we approved last year. So it's nothing new under the sun. We are increasing, you know, if we approve this, we would be increasing the rates at 5%, which was projected, and we're following the model. It was known that we would go negative and then come back out positive in the end. It's just part of this process, and we had to take on those loans to be able to provide water to our citizens in a manner where we could produce it fast enough and then treat it to put it back into the land again. So yeah, I mean, it's not a great decision to make, but it's one that we knew was coming and one that we would have to face. And so I'm for increasing the rates. So we maintain the modeling and can eventually, you know, follow it out and be all good to go in 2028, right around there.
If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind addressing just a couple of things that I heard in questions or comments made. I did want to highlight so Trustee McDonald's not here, but as she likes to say with modeling, right? What comes out of the model is only as good as what goes into the model. So when you're looking at a modeling effort that is projecting many in this case, years into the future, there's a lot of assumptions that are embedded in all of that. There's a lot of best guesses. There's a lot of staff time making sure that they're in line with what we see on the ground today. And then also expertise, bringing in what we anticipate seeing in the future. Along with that, I did want to highlight that there is increases. So there's operational O&M increases included across the board every year, tracking with expected inflation. So those kinds of increases are already embedded in what you see in the modeling effort right now. There are increases that are assumed for wages and salaries across the board, benefits included. There's applied increases in that in a modeling effort in order to set ourselves up for a known future to the best that we can. I did want to highlight, though, in this modeling effort and what you're looking at right now, both the water fund and the wastewater fund are in a positive net fund balance at the end of 2024, which is the budget year that we're looking at talking through right now. That is the rate year that we're talking about and talking through right now. There's a lot of time available to us to continue to brainstorm, to continue to bring opportunities to the board, to continue to bring opportunities to the community that can modify that trajectory. And as far as, considering those changes, possible changes with CIP, capital improvement projects, that's embedded in our thought process every day, as is saving money where we can across the board. And the only reason that we hadn't gone ahead and shifted a little bit is of a timing thing, right? So there's just the timing of when we're coming back to presentations with the board and not wanting to muddy waters and have anything that's in the rate model be then different from what's in the budget modeling effort. So those considerations around, the two projects that I mentioned offhand haven't been shifted yet, but they're in conversations of making sure that that's the best timing for those projects that we can, and in aligning it properly with what keeps us solvent and above board, always. So I did just want to touch on that. Just the fund balance projections at this point, they are projections. They will be updated annually. Trustee Gator had brought up, I think before even the potential of bringing mid-year updates, so we can always ensure that we're, with the board and that we're tracking as we should be. Those are also times that we can bring other decision points forward. I just wanted to highlight that this is a modeling effort. They are projections, and they are our best educated expert guesses in all of those areas to make sure that we are looking forward and we're not ignoring the future, but there is also a lot of time in there available to us to continue to find those places for savings, to continue to find those places for additional dollars to bring forward, and to modify planning if we need to. So.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public on this agenda item?
Evening, folks. Tim Whitehouse, Grant Avenue, Old Town, Wellington. I'm actually very supportive of the rate increases, the capital expense fund increases. I'd like to give you a little historical perspective, because a couple of you were here. We found out in April of 2020 that the water fund was losing $9,000 a day. It was hemorrhaging cash. And so that's why, Ed, prior to that, for years, the water rates remained flat, while depending which metric you use, the cost of water went up 850 or 1,250%. Everybody in this town was receiving subsidized water. The developers were buying water at 44% of market share. That's all gone. What you have in front of you now, at least you have something. I mean, we put the tourniquet on the patient that was bleeding out. The water roundtable came in, and they did some surgical stuff and did some better stuff. You guys now have real modeling. You have real staff. You have projections that go into the future, right? This has all been planned out, and obviously running a negative balance at on the water and wastewater is not necessarily great. The state revolving fund doesn't really like it, but as long as you have a plan to get out of it, which you now in fact have a plan, because strangely, you now have accredited, professional, skilled staff who work their derrieres off. I mean, if anyone's been out to the water and wastewater treatment plants recently, I'm impressed. These guys kick some serious butt. And these folks get, when they get to Wednesday, they're already 40 hours into their week. You figure that out in 8 hours a day. They're working their butts off. So I will have to comment something about the COLA and merit. I mean, our town is in competition with Fort Collins and Loveland, the two biggest municipalities here. Fort Collins suggested 160% water increase, 160%. That somehow the council didn't really like that, and they sent it back. So but I'll just tell you though, so when you talk about, there was, I think, the impact, and I maybe have this number incorrect, that the operation costs of the water and wastewater, a small portion of that is wages. So the merit and COLA, I would say you need to retain these people because you can't run on a skeleton crew like we did at COVID. And they're going to leave for a better paying job. And what's the inboarding cost? Was it $44,000? That covers that. Bringing one person in covers that increase. And so that's only 1% or so. So I think if you say it's 5 to 7% of the entire budget, I would suggest that's not quite. It's a certain percentage of a small portion. So I think you guys are way better set up than we ever were. And I think it's due to you guys working with staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine Gator, just wanted to clarify. I was on the water roundtable, one of the members, and I'm not saying that any of you said this. So I'm just clarifying for anyone who might have thought, but it was not said tonight. The water roundtable, we just came up with a structure. We didn't come up with the numbers. That was Raftalis. We just came up with how it should be billed, but not the numbers. And we didn't come up with a 5% increase. That was Raftalis. So just to clarify, we just came up with a structure as a water roundtable. We didn't have any concrete numbers. We had numbers to play with, but it wasn't anything that we decided. We didn't decide on the numbers or the 5% increase. Just to clarify, not to say that any of you said that, but just wanted to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you. May I get a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 10-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, making adjustments to utility rates.
Was there anybody that had any further comment before we proceed with the vote? Trustee Gator.
You might want a second before you.
Oh.
Second.
All right. Anybody want to proceed with the further comment? No.
I do want to say something. It was mentioned earlier in a response to our comments, actually, about the ongoing efforts to continue to find ways to reduce costs. And that's also included within our strategic plan to make sure that we're identifying self-sustaining strategies to prioritize affordability for residents and implementing utility rate structure to align with community and pricing objectives. That's one of our top 4 tier things that we're working on, including, of course, making sure that we have reliable water and wastewater services for our community. So I did want to point that out because that was brought up earlier.
Thank you. Yeah.
I do want to thank Meagan and Patty Garcia on all the hard work that they have done on this, and all the other people that have worked on these rate structures. And again, I know we're going to have to make some hard decisions, and thank God, we got a great staff, I think, that is starting to look at this too, how to cut and how to make sure that our town is sustainable. And I know it's not rate increases, wage decreases. I know the company I'm working for is taking a huge commission hit for what they're paying us. So I feel they're paying too directly. That's the last thing I ever want to do is take money out of the mouth of kids out there. And that's what we're doing. But again, to have a job, and even if you got a stagnant wage for a year, is better than not having a job down the road. So again, plan for the worst, but hope and pray for the best. Thank you.
Thanks. Trustee Gator.
So I guess just a couple of things that I would bring up is I totally understand what Trustee Meagan said. A year ago, the company I worked with had bad revenues all year, wasn't able to handle it, and I no longer had a job. I didn't get a pay cut. I didn't get an option for no merit. Nope. You no longer have any income at all. I don't want to see that happen to our town. And I know we keep saying, hey, we've got time. Well, that's what we were saying back in 2020 is, okay, this is a few years down the road and we made drastic changes, which have helped, but we're rapidly running out of time. I know we've had the statement, oh, well, we knew it was going to go negative, and the State Department doesn't look kindly on that. The question I continue to ask that no one has been able to answer, I know it's a model, the model's not true, great, but there's a lot of things in the model. If the model is true, how are we going to pay bills with a negative fund balance? I don't care about the state revolving fund. I care about how do we actually pay bills, because last I checked, you can't write checks out of a bank account with no money. The other thing too, and I don't know, I was thinking about this because I know our investment income is listed in here and ranging around $200,000. I know that typically is, I don't know if that's separate from what we get with Colorado Trust, because we get a pretty good rate of return on the money in our bank account. I don't know if that is the investment income or if that's different investment income. Does anyone know the answer? Is that different? That's different investment income?
I don't know.
Okay. I would like to get clarification on that, because that's modeled as increasing year over year. And if that is tied to the rate of return that we get on money in our bank account, when there's no money in the bank account, there's no investment income, which means we're now short several $100,000, because I mean, that's on range of.
Are you looking at line 7 in the wastewater capital expansion fund?
Let me look at so I'm looking at combined water enterprise fund. It is line number 11. So we have investment income, and it looks like it might be tied because it does drop in the water one.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what I was going to highlight, and that's why those
okay.
That's why those projections are really only pretty solid for 2024, and then they drop pretty dramatically.
So why is the wastewater stay consistent at 240 and 260 and 300? Did we not adjust that on line number 7 on the operating fund cash flow analysis for wastewater utility?
Yeah, I see that. But then on the capital expansion fund line, there's also an investment income line on that one that does drop to 0 in 2025. So we can get clarification for you on that.
If we get clarification, that would be great, because that's, if those are different investments, that's great. I just want to make sure that we're not counting money coming in that won't be coming in, because it looks like we adjusted it in the water. I saw it in the wastewater.
Yeah.
So those are my concerns: is how do you pay bills without money in the account?
If you are struggling with a hardship, please don't just not pay your bill. Contact the town. We have allocated funds to help in cases of hardship. So staff has dedicated funds that can assist you. So please don't just stop paying. Contact the town, and we want to help you up to $300 per year, actually, based on your hardship. So let us know if we can help.
Is there a possibility to get that question answered as far as what Trustee Gator asked? How do you pay bills out of a negative account?
So I'm going to step out on a limb here, since my lifeline's not on the phone. But so in the water fund account, that won't go negative.
Okay.
Because there is the buffer. So there's not because the raw water is not included in this, and that is all one fund.
Sorry. So by buffer, you mean the tap fees?
I mean,
raw water.
Exactly.
Funds. Okay.
Exactly. You. So there won't actually be a negative number in that account. And then I do know that Mr. Rhoads had presented as part of his budget presentation on November 14th. There was a slide that did talk about a couple of opportunities that could be done if we get closer to the point where we've identified it needed to be. Though I will point out that since that conversation, we've already reduced that number from $2.5 million to $1.5 million pretty quickly. But there was conversations that the town does have the ability to make an interfund loan. The general fund has dollars. There are other funds that are not in the same predicament that could get structured. We did not have time to build that into this modeling effort, right? So the rate model doesn't capture that, but it can get updated with the same kind of repayment loan structure that we have embedded for the water enterprise fund, the rate model. And it could look similar to that. It could be, we would set our own terms. We're taking a loan from mom, so to speak. So, obviously an interest rate would need to be defined. It would be documented. It would be on the books loan.
So then pretty much, if I'm understanding correctly, what we would be doing is we would be borrowing money from the capital improvements, like the impact fees.
No.
Okay. So you said that the account won't go negative.
So in the water fund, you're talking about the water fund now.
Correct.
So in the water fund, we could carry it in the fund itself because the raw water fund is included in those fund balances. There's 3 combined funds in that singular fund. And so, yes, then you would dip down and come back out and then pay it back.
Got it. So it would just is so I guess in hindsight, and I hate to say it like this, we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, but we have to
with a plan to pay Paul back
Right.
or a plan to pay Peter
back. Got it. So we're pretty much borrowing each money from these accounts to function. Is at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're just borrowing money and transferring it and loaning it to function. I think that's what my main concern is when does that all catch up with each other? Say we have another year this year, like we do next year in 2024, where we see a massive decrease in people watering. Because now, I mean, it's out there everywhere. You have people threatening to not pay their bills for extended period of times. And this is a group that is organizing to not pay their bills. So then you also look at the inevitability of people just turning off their tap during the summer and saying, let my grass die. So we are going forward with the generalized idea that we can rely on our residents to have extended uses of water to pay back these accounts. So that at the end of the day is we are relying on 1, drought, 2, people using their water, which they proved this year very, very well. They are not going to pay a high rate for water. They'll stop using their water. So we're going to spin in a negative. And do we have a generalized idea of how negative we can go on not making revenue funds for that before we can no longer recover? Is this where we hit that? We're 3 years until our water fund does end up bankrupt because we can't pull the revenue out of it to pay North Poudre Irrigation what they're charging us for water. Correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Gator, but that's kind of at the end, that's the reality of what we're facing.
So my concerns are in both funds. It's concerning to go into a negative fund balance. As Ms. Smith said, we do have, again, it's not good because it's another loan. And the challenge is when you take a loan out, well, we now have another $600,000 payment, right? That has to be made every year for 10 years or however long. And so it's not like we can just like say, hey, we need to grab $500,000 from the raw water fund. We actually have to take another loan, which then has to be paid back, which then again increases our debt service over time. The water fund, as we've talked about, if we're able to renegotiate that contract, that sells a lot of things. I agree that hands down, that is the biggest expense in that fund by far. And if we can get that down, that will save our bacon. The sewer fund is really the scary one because our big expense there is a loan. That's a 30-year loan. There's not a negotiation process there. And if we're taking out additional loans to help cover operations, that's a huge problem because, well, our problem in that fund right now is we can't afford to make the loan payment. And so we're going to take out more loans to make the loan payment, which then just makes the loan payment higher. It's like a snowball. So now, if we get lots of building and everything comes in and we build 500 houses, great. That solves a lot of problems. But if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, we're continuing to put ourselves in a worse position. And then on top of that, as we continue raising, and this is where my concern comes with wages, because again, those go up every year, right? It's 3% this year, and that's 3% higher next year, and 6%. It just continues to. So as we're continuing to build expenses, we're taking out loans to cover those expenses, then we have to take out loans to cover the loans, and it just keeps snowballing in a worse and worse direction unless something changes. And so what I'm trying to say is let's not keep increasing those expenses that we can control until we can figure out a way to get out of the ones that we can't, or to fix the problem that we can't control. That's my concern. And it's more so on the wastewater side because I have yet to see the magic bullet that fixes the problem outside of massive construction happening, which we have been told we don't have lots ready to build right now. So that can't happen for multiple years, and there's a lot with it. So that's my concern there.
So one thing, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go for
I'm
it.
sorry. So there was actually a discussion in-house earlier this evening when looking at these financial plans, especially. I do believe wholeheartedly that especially in the sewer fund or the wastewater fund, the impact fees are going to be reviewed again next year. They will be reviewed every year. If I had a crystal ball, I would predict that impact fee rate increase to the impact fee will likely be higher than what was seen this year. And part of that is for some of the points that you were making. I will also say, though, in that fund, it's not necessarily the loan payment that is driving that. It was the unforeseen not also a great explanation to say, but the truth. The unforeseen or uncaptured defeasance payment and the payoff of the other loan in that fund on the upfront that was not captured in that original modeling effort, that's what puts that into that negative for that year, and then comes right back out of it, as you can see. So the ongoing loan payment is captured and embedded to be funded in whole moving forward. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Ms. Meagan, you got anything? Okay. Clerk, make it a roll call, please.
Trustee Mason,
Yes.
trustee Daly,
Yes.
trustee Teets,
No.
trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
trustee Gator,
No.
Mayor Shosse.
Yes.
With the vote of 4 in favor, 2 against, the motion carries and ordinance number 10-2023 is approved.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title of item E2?
Ordinance number 11-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, making adjustments to water and wastewater capital investment fees.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Meagan will present.
Thank you. Again, welcome back. As presented at our last meeting, it was much simpler, as these topics are so tied together, that we covered all of the background material and all of the financial plan impacts were related in the previous packet items. So at this point, we'll stand for any questions if you have any more specific to just impact fees, which are represented with this ordinance. But I believe we may have covered most things.
Trustee Gator?
I literally only have one question. It's just more of a curiosity as to, I know like we have to give like reasoning and supportive data behind raising the capital improvement rates. I'm curious as to why we're not required to do so on residential rates. Like on the capital, like, hey, we can't do this, otherwise people will sue us. We have to show there's constructed data and all this other stuff, but we're just able to say, hey, we're going to increase rates for 5 years in the model for residential, but we can't do that on cap. So I'm just wondering why there's one side you have to have it, but on the other side you don't.
That would be a statutory question that I don't have the answer to, but we can find that out. Oh, we do have a lawyer.
That's a very interesting question, investigator. The capital impact fees are fees, as opposed to water rates. In terms of a water rate, it's the town is functioning as an enterprise, as we know, it's an enterprise fund. An enterprise is basically the government function operating a business. So in that regard, it's setting its rates for the business, its enterprise. A capital fee or an impact fee under Tabor needs to offset the cost of government of doing a government function.
Okay.
And so they're two very different things.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Absolutely.
Oh, handy.
Trustee Teets?
I don't have any additional questions. I am grateful that you guys did look into this. I did want to say, Meagan, I understand you weren't here when all of these issues started. So when I drill you or question you, it's not you specifically, it's the town as a whole, because you were not here when this all happened in general. So I just want to make sure that one's well known. But I don't have any additional questions on this. I'm grateful to see the increase to help cover those costs as we do look at building in the future. I hope will alleviate some of what you have to do in these kind of situations.
Thank you for your hard work. And I think you already said we're going to be reviewing this periodically. So if we do need to adjust it down the road, we can.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Trustee Daly?
I'm very, very proud to be a part of a board where every single one of us is so concerned about, reducing costs and improving revenues for all of these kind of things. Not one of us doesn't care about these. So it's very important to all of us who are up here. So after saying that, I hear so much passion about reducing or reducing costs, regardless of like an environment of inflation that we're in. My hope is, and my challenge to our board, is that you use that same passion that immediately impacts this ordinance, because these funds and these fees are only incurred when we approve development in our community. So when we say we need to cut costs, yet maybe stand up here and make it more harder, more complicated, or not as welcoming or encouraging for development to occur, when we're talking about all this money that comes from capital improvements, I hope that we remember this conversation, because we're talking about increasing this fee as well, but this fee only happens when we approve development. This fee only happens when we have people who want to come to Wellington to build. If we aren't welcoming, if we don't have staff to support this effort of them coming and being welcomed and having an easy process, a quick process to build and invest in our community, then we are shooting ourselves and not allowing us to get this revenue. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at this picture both ways, but I do understand, and I understand that we're all committed to reducing costs, increasing revenue. So I appreciate it about that, board, and I'm glad that we stand similar on all those things.
Thank you, Meagan. Any comments from the public on this item? No. Do I hear a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 11-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, making adjustments to water and wastewater capital investment fees.
Second.
Mr. Clerk, may I get a roll call, please?
Trustee Mason,
Yes.
trustee Daly,
Yes.
trustee Gator,
Yes.
trustee Teets,
Yes.
trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
Mayor Shosse.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously and ordinance number 11-2023 is approved.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title of item E3?
Ordinance number 12-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, recodifying municipal code chapter 6 concerning business licensing.
Thank you. And then Ms. Patty Garcia and Mr. Dan Sapienza will be presenting this and answering any questions we may have.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor and Trustees. Patty Garcia, Town Administrator. So I've heard from the trustees that you want us to find ways to support small businesses that are doing business or want to do business in Wellington. One area that I could see that we could work on immediately was addressing Chapter 6 of the Wellington Municipal Code, which is related to business licensing. The current code is incredibly confusing, and the proposed changes intend to make requirements and the business licensing process clear, which is something that Mr. Sapienza will address. The goal for business licensing is to provide us knowledge of the businesses we have in town. It will give us a good database of businesses that we can reach out to and support. There will be no additional costs, as we will be using software we currently have in place to process the license applications. The applications will be available online, and we plan to enhance the information for home occupations so that business owners have access to the guiding documents and the information that they need. This is a code update that will streamline our processes and make a positive change in how we support our local businesses. I will turn this over to Mr. Sapienza, who will talk about the legal aspects.
Thank you.
Dan Sapienza, town attorney. As Ms. Garcia stated, really the intent here is to create a licensing structure that's business friendly, and we also want it to be user friendly for staff. Want to make sure the town has sufficient information and authority to ensure businesses are carried out in a safe manner that are compliant with law. Trustee Gator contacted me the other day and asked about, excuse me, I'll speak into the microphone a little closer. I was lounging back there. Trustee Gator contacted us asking about a red line of this to show the changes. And I think it was a great comment. I'm glad to hear that the trustees appreciate getting that. And whenever we have large changes to code, it's important that you know what we're changing. However, in this one, we kind of included the red line by saying, we're getting rid of 1 and 2 and we're replacing it with this. This was a total rewrite from the ground up. Articles 1 and 2 of Chapter 6 are incredibly dated. As Ms. Garcia said, it's difficult to understand. It's hard for town staff to follow. And if it's hard for town staff to follow what Chapter 6 says, I mean, it's hard for me to understand what it says in many cases. I think when 5 words might suffice, what's currently in chapter 6 will say it in about 30 or 40 words. It's something else. So we decided the best course of action here was scrap it and start fresh. And so in doing that, we looked at other municipalities around the area at what they're doing, but also looked around the country. Business licensing is something that's done at the municipal and county level all over the country. So we want to get some ideas, and there's a wide range of what municipalities do. So when we drafted this, we want to kind of thread that needle of making it doable for town staff, make it operational for town staff, but also make it work for businesses. So I'm just going to go through kind of what the intent of the process that's in the proposed Chapter 6, Article 2 here, which is the business licensing provisions. It all starts with an application. Every business in the town needs to have a business license, and really the key to this is that application where the town receives the information it needs. It spells out very clearly all of that, and the application will be filled out with an oath or affirmation, and essentially that's upon we've all signed these documents when we fill out official applications for things. Upon penalty of perjury, I swear that the information contained in this application is true and correct. So what we're looking for here is the business to provide that information about what they do, to provide the information that they understand the laws that apply to their business and that they'll comply with them. So upon receiving that application, the town clerk will issue a business license. If the license is denied for some reason, if it's incomplete, if it's known that the business did not comply with law, we'll make it easy for the business to understand why. So right there, if it's denied, immediately the town clerk must issue a written denial with the grounds for that. And then later in the chapter, we get into how that's appealed if the applicant decides thinks that's incorrect. Once it's issued, a number of governments have a suspension process, a revocation process. And as I was thinking about how that might work in the town, I didn't want to use the word suspended license, because if a license is suspended, you by definition can't use it. And it's definitely not our intent, or not the town's intent, to stop people from doing business. So created sort of an intermediate probationary status. And the idea here was, if violations are found, for one, if they don't renew their license timely, if they owe money to the town, or if they're conducting activity that violates federal, state, or local laws. If that's found, they'll be put on a probationary status. The town clerk will send a notice in writing. If that probationary status is not fixed within 30 days, then they moved to a revoked status, or they may. And I think here's where we really wanted to, when I was thinking how this would work, I want to make sure that this was a collaborative process. This wasn't 30 days, bam, done. There's a lot of flexibility. And so right there, it's not that it's automatically revoked after 30 days of being on this kind of probationary status. There's room there for the town clerk to extend that. What we're intending is to keep businesses running and to bring them into compliance. So we want to work with them. And so all of this is designed to not have any sort of automatic penalty for noncompliance. However, if after time, in minimum of 30 days, they do not cure that probationary status, there is a process for revoking a business license. So again, not cured in 30 days. If there was fraud in the application, the license can be revoked. Or if it's the business activities are deemed to be a public nuisance or a danger to health and safety of the community, or violates the law, they can also be revoked. And that would be outside of the probationary status. I mean, we want to make sure that there's a process if the town needs it. Again, where there's a public nuisance or a real danger to health or safety. If a license is revoked, really what that means is they need to reapply. So didn't want to create some new process here. They apply for a new business license application, and to get that, they would have to show, well, I know my license was revoked before. I have to show that I cured whatever that was that caused the license to be revoked. Appeals are covered in section 62110 of this. If a license was denied, or excuse me, an application was denied, or if a license was revoked, the license holder or the applicant can appeal that. The first step is an appeal to the town clerk. basically that's a request for a do-over. We think should be a relatively quick administrative hearing for the applicant or the license holder to say, no, you were wrong, town. If the applicant or the license is still denied and they want to appeal that again, it can come to the town board. And we thought that was a good intermediate step. And the goal there is to be speedy in hearing those appeals. If a business conducts business, if they conduct business without a license, it's a violation of the town code. It is a non-criminal violation, but every day that they operate without a license is a new violation. This would be prosecuted in municipal court. So, as I said, as we were developing this, I was looking at a lot of other municipalities, a lot of other counties and governments, and so I tried to make it. I thought the real intent here with the town was to make it easy for businesses to operate. We wanted to be business friendly, so the license application on the front end is intended to be a straightforward process for the applicant and for the town to process. But then we retain I'll say on the back end, on the probation and the revocation process, the authority, if needed, to step in and cure violations. As I said, this is all new. We threw out the really wordy and confusing section and tried something new here. I absolutely would welcome any questions you might have. And if I can't answer them, now the clerk and I worked on this quite a bit, and Ms. Garcia as well.
Thank you. Questions start with Trustee Meagan.
Yes, I do have a question. Get to it here. As far as revocation, it says when it appears that the activity conducted pursuant to such license, violates any federal, state, or local laws. We have one on the south side of town that violates federal law right now. Marijuana. What are we going to do on that? That's my question.
It's a great question. I think that's a great question. Federal violating federal, state, and local laws. Might need to amend that section. Or do we?
Trustees.
So this is something I actually had a moment to speak with Dan before our meeting this evening, and I have every page highlighted questions. It's one thing that I would like to look at. I realize and understand that, again, on the federal, state, and local side of things, we as an employer did not mandate the vaccination for COVID for our employees. If we were to not have mandated that and sent them out to work, we were violating the health code of what they put in during emergency orders. They could revoke my license. So I think I've got a lot. I can start at the top and go down. I have a feeling I would love to see this come back as a work session. That gives time for Dan to answer the federal related ones.
I would love it if you would give me all of your questions before that as well.
I will, and I will send them all to you. It was just a fact of the matter of, I understand that there are some things that are great in here that do speed up a process and support a business, but there are also things in here when I was looking through it that will make at-home occupation businesses a lot harder to operate, and could also affect some of the non-at-home businesses. So there's a lot of questions I do have, and I'm happy to actually draft them all and send them to all of the trustees in case you guys had some of the possibly the same questions as I did. But I can either start up top or can request to move it to a work session. Got it. I'll let everybody else ask their questions first, though.
I think at this point, I don't see point for further question. We just move it to a work session if we're all in agreement.
I'm in agreement because I had similar concerns and I did talk to Dan, and I think that and again, we may decide as a board, we're okay with some of the things as they are, but I think that there needs to be a time for a conversation on this because I appreciate it's much easier to read.
Yeah.
But there are a few minor changes that could have pretty extraordinary. So I would agree. I think moving to work session would be good.
Perfect.
I do just appreciate the part where it's referencing land use code for use purposes. I think that's the cleanest and easiest way to do it, obviously, for reference of that. And then I did have a question of whether or not December 31st is typically used for license renewal, because that seems like it would be an inconvenient time of year. But I don't know if that's standard. If so, that's the
Pretty normal.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to take this to a working session.
Okay.
So I want to give Trustee Mason a chance if you want to say anything.
Do you have anything?
Nope.
Okay.
So the question I have is to what work session, because I know we have a tentative, maybe possibly meeting on the 19th, but we're trying not to use that.
Yeah.
Do we want to? Do we want to push it to January? Because I think we're going to have a lot on the 12th.
Shall we just schedule it to a date certain for a decision, and then let scheduling occur as it should for work session purposes?
So I can. So
yeah.
Does end of January or last meeting in January work? Does that give us enough time to, or should I push it to February?
Concern is getting adopted and it has to be adopted. We can't put it in place for 30 days post adoption.
So question, I know we can do emergency ordinance. Can we do it as an emergency ordinance for something like this where it takes effect immediately? I know that's an ability we've used in the past. I don't know if it applies to this.
I always am hesitant to bring forward any sort of emergency ordinance. In the past, the concern has been what's the emergency.
Okay.
And so in this case, we can look at that, but wouldn't be.
Okay.
I think in the past, the board has expressed a desire to not use emergency.
I prefer not to. I'm just
except in cases of real emergency.
So that's why I'm asking dates. I mean, if we're trying to get this done quickly, we
last meeting in January.
That works for me. Is that good for everyone else? Yeah. Okay. I move that we postpone ordinance number 12-2023, an ordinance of the town of Wellington, Colorado, recodifying municipal code chapter 6 concerning business licensing to our regular meeting on January. Let me get the right date here.
It's the 23rd.
I second.
Mr. Clerk, may I get a roll call, please?
Trustee Gator?
Yes.
Trustee Dietz?
Yes.
Trustee Mason?
Yes.
Trustee Daly?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Mayor Shosse?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously and the item is tabled to January the 23rd regular meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Trustee Dietz and members of the board, please just send your questions directly to me rather than showing them with everybody. I can then combine them into one kind of series of questions and use that for discussion purposes rather than having a lot of different questions being floated around. So, thanks.
Thanks. All right, Mr. Clerk, will you please read the title for item E4?
Town Treasurer / Finance Director Recruitment.
Ms. Garcia, Town Administrator, will be presenting to us.
Thank you, Mayor and Trustees. I am sad to say that we can't keep Don Rhoads as our Finance Director / Treasurer. We have begged, we have offered him things, money, snacks, and he's not going to stay forever. So it's fortunate if we've been fortunate to have him here and assist in getting our finances up to date into a place that we're all feeling comfortable. Staff is finally in a place where we trust the numbers that are coming out and feel very good about the future. He does have a few more tasks that need to be completed, such as working on financial policies and seeing the 2021 audit finalized. He's ready to transition to working with us on an as-needed consultant basis if that's the direction the Board of Trustees wants to go in the future. He does that for other municipalities that he has served as interim in, so that when the new person is on board, if there's questions, we can still reach out to Don and get those questions answered. Then we get a small bill in the mail. So the town is, in the past, the town has contracted with a professional recruiter for the last two finance director treasurers in Wellington. And Human Resources has budgeted $29,000 for executive recruitment in 2024. I say that, but we have had a lot of recent success with the recruitment of employees using our internal processes. for posting of positions, creating marketing materials, and using recruiting networks to promote the opportunity. Mr. Rhoads has offered his experience to assist us with this effort. In his role at Baker Tilly, one of the things that he does assist with is their recruiting for other finance director, treasurers. That's one of the services that Baker Tilly offers. He's the one that they contact that goes through the vetting of those first round of applications, and then goes through and does the first round of phone interviews. He then determines who has the technical abilities that are needed to fill the position. He has offered to provide that for us. Since he's been in Wellington for several months, he understands the needs of our municipality and is aware of the skills needed to be successful here. If the recruitment would be conducted internally, there would be nominal costs. That's just to post the position on external marketing sites. The sooner the position is filled, the more time Mr. Rhoads will have to transition the new finance director treasurer into Wellington. And Mr. Rhoads has offered to stay on retainer as a consultant to assist as needed. I would love to start the recruitment process right after the first of the year and would like to get feedback and direction from the trustees on the recruitment as it moves forward. The town can put out a request for proposal for a firm to conduct the recruitment, or it can be handled in-house through human resources. As the treasurer is a board-appointed position, I would like to have one, if not two, trustees on the interview panel. If possible, I would like the board to appoint those individuals tonight, no pressure. So when the time comes, we can start moving quickly on the recruitment and scheduling of interviews. And to wrap up, I am looking for direction related to the recruitment, wanting some direction from you. This is a big position. We've had some struggles with finding a good qualified person, so I want to make sure I'm moving forward as the Board of Trustees would like me to. And then the appointment of board members to the interview panel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Start with Trustee Daly.
I can clearly state that I think that we have received subpar applicants from recruitment firms in the past. I'm not happy with the dollars spent for those efforts to receive unqualified candidates. So I don't think that using a recruitment firm is what we should do. We have someone who's proven that we appreciate very much, Mr. Rhoads, who knows exactly what we need and want. And we have very capable people and capable of running a recruitment process in-house. It would save us money and get us somebody that we need, that we can keep, and that will assist and aid the town of Wellington. So I'm very much against using a recruitment firm for this position.
Trustee Gator.
Yep. So I know this was it wasn't an item, but it was discussed just briefly at the finance committee, and they were in agreement getting a full-time finance director, and is a good thing because then Mr. Rhoads can get them up to speed. So they felt it would be a great idea. I agree with Trustee Daly. I think we should look at doing things in-house, and that way we can get started. Because again, if we do an RFP, we've got to go through RFP process, and that takes us a couple of months. So even if we went with a firm, we're going to delay things. Let's start with the internal process. If we see that we're getting zero traction and nothing good, the nice thing is we're in a position where we have Mr. Rhoads that can continue to serve. He won't do it long-term, but he's able to be here for the time being. So if we find out, hey, we're just not getting what we're looking for, then we can go back and look into going the firm route. But I agree with Trustee Daly. I'd prefer to use the staff we have in-house, use Mr. Rhoads' expertise, and go down that route. The one other piece that kind of ties into this that I would, tonight isn't really the night, but it is at the same time. I feel very strongly that one of the things that we need to look at is, should we continue to have the treasurer and finance director positions merged together as one position? And here, there's several areas for that concern. So a typical organization, you have your finance director, someone who runs all the numbers, they put all the reports together. And then you have the treasurer, who actually is typically a member of the board. They may not be a voting member of the board, but they're actually a member of the board. And then those reports are given to the treasurer. They review them. If there's any errors, they send that out. And it's not a big deal. It's not like, oh, there's malicious. It's like, hey, you accidentally put a wrong number in here. Can you change that and fix it? The treasurer's role is also to look at the long range, right? What is the financial situation? I think that's something that we have lacked since I've been on the board, that Mr. Rhoads finally brought in. Was we're working with staff to take the data they had to pull that together and say, hey, here are some of the things. I mean, this is the first time we've gotten like actual concrete things, like here's what this is looking like, here's where we're going, here's what's coming. But the challenge is if your treasurer is swamped trying to just manage the day-to-day of the finance director, they're not looking at the big picture. Where are we going in 5 years? They're not putting together models. And I was able to have great conversations with Mr. Rhoads this last week and talking about the numbers and things like that. And so appreciated that. But he's talking about, one of the things he'd love to do is, putting together 5-year models and all these things. But it's simply, if you're doing the busy work of being a finance director, which has to be done, you don't have the time to do the higher level work of a treasurer. And so I don't know what this would look like, but what I'd love to see is, do we hire a finance director? And then I don't know that Mr. Rhoads would be willing to do this, but someone that we can bring on as a kind of a retainer consultant. They're not there all the time, but they serve as that treasurer role where they're reporting to the board. They're kind of that second set of eyes. They're reviewing things, but they're also doing that long-term, that higher level vision to give us actual things like, hey, here's what we need to be looking at. And they're aware of the numbers. They look at the numbers, but they're not busy all day trying to just manage the numbers that they don't have time to get above that. And so that almost needs to be its own conversation, because I think there's a lot more entailed in that, because then that looks, okay, what does the code say? What do the positions look like? What does it look like? There's a lot in that, but at the same time, if that's something we're open to doing, we don't want to recruit for one position and then actually be looking for another, if that makes sense. So I don't know what that looks like, but I agree we need to start recruitment. I would like to actually sit down and at least have a conversation about, would it make sense? What would it look like to actually split those out and have someone who's dedicated to that treasurer position versus having someone who's split with both? Because again, maybe it was just the people we had, but I honestly think there's been so much backlog of financial catch up that's had to be done in the town of Wellington that even if we had a good person, I mean, it took Mr. Rhoads a couple of months to get up to speed on everything. And like, he's been doing this for decades. And when there's just that amount of stuff, when you have to manage the day-to-day, that's what you have to do. And what happens is the future stuff is like, it's like that can wait. So it always keeps getting backburnered. And the problem for us is we're not getting that feedback to then be able to put into our decision-making process, because we're not getting those until it's like, hey, we're a year down the road, we're 2 years down the road. It's like, it's much better if we're getting that information, like, hey, here's where we're going to be in 5 years. And not just here's the numbers, which is great to have those, but here's the numbers, and here are some ways that you can address the concerns, or you can plan for this, and you can start making decisions today to impact 5 years from now. So that's my thought on that. So I'd agree on that. I'd be happy to be a part of the interview process on the board. I read the numbers all the time. I have a background in that, so I'd be happy to be part of that. But those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
So perhaps that's a good question for when Mr. Rhoads is here at the next meeting on December 12th. That'll still give us some time to if we need to change up job descriptions or anything like that. I will let him know that you've brought this forward, and he knows what's required and all of that, so he'll have a pretty good idea.
We chatted for like 5 seconds about it at the finance committee, so it shouldn't be a fully new idea to him. We literally, I mentioned it, and he was like, "Oh, I'll talk to Patty," but that's about as far as it
fabulous.
Went, so.
And we have not seen each other yet this week, so this makes sense. Thank you.
Definitely worth a conversation, because I have different interpretations of treasurer position too. Definitely outside of an auditing type position, not serving in that kind of role at all. So, but I didn't make my recommendations on who should serve as in my opinion, I think people who are the 2022 terms should serve on this hiring board, because they're the ones who will for sure be working with this finance director in the future. So that would be my suggestions. So not Ashley, John, or I, just based on the fact that those are the people who will be for sure working with this finance director in the future. So.
Thank you. Okay. So I love the idea of separating out that treasurer and finance director. So totally supportive of what that looks like for the future. And hopefully having that treasurer assimilated maybe can tie into economic development and know what we're planning for in the future as well. As far as members that do the interview process, I feel Trustee Gator is probably the best suited at this time, because he is handling all the finance stuff at this time. I feel
to clarify, I'm on the finance committee. I don't handle town finances.
Okay. No. So, but the in-depth, the direct knowledge that he has and the platforms that you guys discuss and look at is definitely something that I feel comfortable with Trustee Gator doing. When it comes to a secondary person, I'm pretty much supportive of whomever I think everyone agrees with as far as who wants to do the secondary part of the interview. So.
Thank you. Trustee Wiegand.
Good evening again. I think it's a great idea of doing it in-house. Mr. Rhoads, he knows how the system works now. He knows what to look for the person coming in, the questions to ask and all that. So I think that's going to put us so much ahead of where we were at on the previous hires. So extremely comfortable with that. And as far as people to be on this, I think the 2 trustees, a good idea. Again, I sell insurance. I'm not a CPA or an economic type person. I think John is. I think Brian would be, or our illustrious mayor would probably be a good one to be on that particular one also. So, I mean, we got some great people here. I don't think we should just limit it to, and, you know, who knows? You guys might be on it the next 4 years too. So we don't know yet. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Mason.
Yeah, I'd absolutely be in support of doing this in-house. I think the expertise that Mr. Rhoads has brought would be absolutely essential to getting somebody in here that's qualified. I think Trustee Gator and I were actually part of the folks that had assisted staff with getting Mr. Rhoads here from Baker Tilly. So certainly I would not be opposed to assisting in that interview process if the board agrees. So.
I'm just dying up here. Yeah, great points, Trustee Gator. Yeah, definitely worth looking into the treasurer. Yeah, I support both you guys being on the committee there, interviewing panel, whatever works there. Yeah. I guess, are there any comments from the public on this item? I was looking for some too. I couldn't find it.
Good evening, board. Melissa Whitehouse, 3922 Grant Avenue. The only issue I ran into, I do agree that actually it should be part of 2 of the 4 that we know for sure are going to be here, not according to the 3 that may or may not be. The one issue I really strongly ran into was Trustee Gator's statement. I believe it's exactly the opposite of what you described. I have a bachelor's degree in corporate finance, and it is the finance director that does the forecasting. It is the finance director that does the financial analysis. The treasurer, and this is in the corporate world, the treasurer is the checks and balances. The treasurer is the bookkeeper per se. The treasurer is the one you go to, does the audits if you really need an audit. The finance director is really the meat of it. That's the person that you want to have there to do the forecast. So please focus on that person more than any other. And the treasurer, if anything, checks and balances. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I heard is we want to do an internal recruitment. And then I've heard support for trustees Gator and Mason to conduct the interviews. That's what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, on to reports.
Just as a kind of follow-up on that, just if we can, I don't know if we want to have a discussion at the 12th meeting or main meeting of the 12th just on the treasurer, finance director position. We can pull together some information and just have that discussion, and whatever direction we go, then we can kind of, that way staff is clear. We don't have to delay anything. So yeah, that's not like a decision. I just, maybe we can make sure it's on the agenda.
I had one additional question. I know it made recommendation on here that we could invite someone from the finance committee as well. Is that something that the board
Planned in.
supports?
That's already planned in the process.
Never mind.
Yep.
All good. All gravy, baby. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Trustee Gator. Reports, Mr. Sapienza.
No reports at this time.
Thank you, sir. Town Administrator, Ms. Garcia.
All right. As most of you know, Senate Bill 23B-001 concerning a reduction in 2023 property taxes was signed by Governor Polis on November 20th, 2023. For the 2023 tax year, this legislation temporarily reduces the valuation for assessment of multifamily residential and all other residential real property to 6.7% of the amount equal to the actual value minus the lesser of $55,000 or the amount that causes the valuation to be $1,000. Local governmental entities for which the assessed value of property increased by 15% or more between the 2022 and 2023 property tax years are not reimbursed for the revenue reductions established in the bill. Wellington's assessed valuation went up 33%, so we will not be reimbursed for the revenue reductions in the bill. Proposition HH would have reduced the residential assessment rate to the same. Homeowners would also get to exempt the first $50,000 of their home's valuation from taxation in 2023. So it's somewhat similar to Prop HH. And when we did the analysis for that, which was confirmed with Larimer County, we were looking at a reduction of $137,000 in property tax revenues for 2024. Over the past several days, I have been working on finding reductions to cover that loss, and have found $150,000 in budget reductions related to operations. It is taking from some need, but that's what we need to do to cover this unexpected reduction in revenues. So Larimer County is not guaranteed we would receive the mill levy information before January 3rd of 2024. I posed the question on the manager's listserv as to how other municipalities were proceeding with their budget and mill levy adoption. All municipalities, large and small, responded that they were moving forward with their current schedule of adopting their budgets. Some have actually already adopted their budgets. Others are adopting tonight, some next week, and some are scheduled for their December meeting, like on the 12th, like we are. I did talk to Don Rhoads today about it, sent him all the information that I had and that had been provided to me, and we talked about recommending continuing with the current schedule of including the budget, annual appropriations, and levy of general property taxes on the December 12th, 2023 trustee agenda. That's what we've been promoting. It's what's been put out in the public. At that time, if the Board of Trustees would like to continue that to a later date, say into January, the bill has provided a provision where budgets can be adopted up until January 10th, 2024, if that's the case. And talking to Don, we would use, if for the presentation on December 12th, we would be using the information that we'd received from the county assessor's office back in late September, early October, for the mill levy information. We would then have, if the budget, if everything were to be adopted in December, Don has proposed that we would have a budget review or potentially an amendment in April. We get through the first quarter. We would get through anything related to North Poudre. We should have some information by March regarding where we're at with North Poudre, so we could do a budget amendment of some sort in March or April that could address any changes that we would need to make based on the mill levy calculations. So that's my update. I had received a couple emails and I was surprised that I wasn't seeing any information on like the manager's listserv and things like that. So once I put it out, everybody started talking about it. So everyone's in the same place. This has happened very quickly with no warning. And so everyone is just moving forward in their current methods and then planning on some sort of budget amendment if needed, like first quarter.
Thank you.
So that is the information I have for you. Oh, Bob has something to say about this.
Mr. Gowan.
I really just wanted to give a quick update on public works staffing. You know, we don't do that very often, but it may or may not be germane to questions earlier, and that's not why I'm up here saying this, but I think there's things about our staffing that you should know. So in public works, we're fully staffed at the wastewater treatment plant. Thank you. In collections distribution, in engineering, and in streets. We have 6 positions out at the water plant. We have 2 employees out there. So right now we're down a superintendent, lead operator, and 2 operators out there. And the environment that our employees, the employment market doesn't work in favor of the employers right now. There's other utilities out there that are paying pretty good wages, signing bonuses, you name it. I've hired over 30 people into public works since I've been here in my 5 years. And I can personally attest that the time and the risk to the town of retraining employees and training new employees is enormous. It's a huge drain on this town. The risk that it creates is, in my opinion, untenable. But here we are again, down 4 people out at the water treatment plant, and just want to let you guys know that.
Thank you, sir.
Bob, I have a question for you related to that. Was there specific reasons, and you don't have to go into specifics, but was it all related to wages?
Wages is always, they're professionals, right? We hire professionals. We demand a lot of our people. Good enough isn't really good enough here. We need more from people. So other jobs that pay more can usually be, frankly, a little bit easier, a little bit narrower. They can focus on fewer things. We need our people to be able to handle a lot of different situations, emergencies, different functions here. So we do ask a lot of our people, and I would say that money is always a factor when people are changing jobs. They're all professionals. They all need to bring home the money. They need to bring home the bacon, every one of them. And I'm happy to say that I think over half of our employees live right here in Wellington and also get to pay our utility rates.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant Cherry, do you have a presentation for us?
I'm going to make this quick. I never do anything quickly, so this is going to be a stretch for me. Just going to kind of go off my notes. If it's all right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to kind of talk about September. I was out for the last meeting. I was unable to kind of recap that. I'll do it really, really quick. Dispatch calls and self-initiated calls were pretty similar to the same time last year. Person and property crimes were notably down over the last 3 years in the month of September. So we're looking at the same month, just kind of comparing September over the last 3 years, and everything was down. Do I have an answer for that or an explanation? I just don't. It's just kind of how crime happens sometimes. Some of the disorder type crimes, those remain fairly consistent. Animal calls for the last 6 months, they have gone up considerably. Municipal code violations, I don't know if you noticed, in September, it went up 6,800%. Now, it's not like we were doing hundreds of these types of calls or anything like that, but we're getting into the neighborhoods more. We're putting a big focus on illegally parked vehicles that are abandoned, all of those types of things. I really think we're starting to make a difference here. And then coordination with the neighborhood services officer, I really think we're making a huge impact there. So I'm hoping that continues. Some of our traffic stats, we made 108 traffic stops. So we're out there getting after it. In September, we had 5 less motor vehicle accidents than September of last year. 2 additional DUI arrests, and some of our citations were up. Switching to October for this, what's in your packet now. I'm just kind of recapping. Deputy Schultz went on to work with the mental health co-responder unit. He's going to do fantastic. And we end up picking up Deputy Boggs. And of course, in another month, December 28th, we're going to do another shift change. So we have 5 new deputies. I shouldn't say new, but 5 different deputies are going to be rotating into Wellington. Unfortunately, I'm losing my fantastic Corporal Baker. But I'm picking up another awesome corporal, and that's Jamie Michelle Smith. She's going to do great. Varying experience from little to no to a couple deputies that are actually in our field training officer program right now. That's one came from Boulder County Sheriff, one came from Loveland Police Departments, and they left those agencies just because they didn't like the culture. They liked the culture with the sheriff's office better, and they're very eager to get out there and get after it. So I think that they're going to do fantastic. Dispatch calls were down about 9% over last year, which is, I don't know if that's just kind of a fluke or whatnot, since some of our self-initiated activity was down as well, which always bums me out because I want to make sure that we're getting out there and talking to people. Property crimes are slightly down with some fewer thefts, but unfortunately we had a couple of vehicle trespasses just southwest of the Ridleys. I don't know why. Sometimes they're targets of opportunity. What we are noticing countywide is with the vehicle trespasses is that there are a number of them that have been locked vehicles, and there's been no forced entry into the vehicle at all. We're still trying to figure out how they're making entry into these vehicles. People are getting pretty savvy these days, just as far as how they're able to make entry. I just remind our citizens at all times to make sure that you're not keeping any valuables in sight. Certainly don't leave firearms in vehicles. It always surprises me when we have vehicles broken into and handguns are stolen and then now they're out on the street. So just reminding people, don't keep any valuables in your vehicle that you don't want to have stolen. Some of the disorder type crimes, animal calls, again, continue to be up every month. And again, an 11,000% increase of municipal code violations. Again, that is not, some horrendous thing or anything like that. Again, we're getting out there, looking for those vehicles that are improperly parked. We have not been writing a lot of citations for those vehicles. We have not been impounding a lot of those vehicles. We made up our own warning cards. We're just slapping those on windshields and just kind of writing down what the fine could be. And we're really seeing some good results with that people are just making the change. What we didn't want to do is go around people that are parking too close to stop signs or in front of fire hydrants. That's a different thing. You're going to get a ticket for that. But vehicles that are parked on the wrong side of the street, those types of things, if they've been doing it for a while, we didn't want to go around and penalize somebody with a ticket. We want to try to correct that behavior. And if it continues, we can go back and issue a citation or knock on somebody's door. And just some of our traffic stops. With Deputy Schultz leaving, he's one of my major traffic enforcement guys. My traffic stats dropped, and that just makes me sad, brings a tear to my eye. We saw a 41% decrease in just traffic stops from the same time last year, 20 less citations. And we're not big citation people as far as writing everybody's citations. That's not what we're just trying to correct negative behaviors out there. Real quick, about a year ago, I had this has nothing to do with law enforcement, obviously, but I'll get to my point here. I had a dishwasher installed, and the guy that was installing it, he says, every single time we put one of these in, we want to know how you felt about it. Did we do a good job? We always hear the negative, but we never hear the positive, that, hey, we've knocked it out of the park. If it was a successful installation, we never hear about it. but we always hear about the negative. Okay. We put out our weekly, as often as we can, releases of information. I get some responses from a few of you. So here's my opportunity to get up and say, board, how are we doing? What do you like? What do you not like? Are we completely stinking at what we're doing? If we're completely stinking, let me know, hey, you guys really stink in this area. And that way I can change it. If we're knocking it out of the park, cool. But let us know. And if you're talking to our citizens, you're hearing those things, please have them give me a call, give them my work cell, or give me a call directly, and we can make some of those changes. So are we doing okay?
Fantastic.
Good.
I had such good interactions with your entire team on Trick or Treat on Main Street. It's so much fun to see everybody out there and to see you guys there, and then all the people on bikes and stuff. It's a wonderful presence. Kids love you guys.
Good.
I love it. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
All good things I've heard.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I would agree with what's been said. You guys are doing great. I appreciate just the word I'm looking for, kind of the environment or the attitude that you've kind of put in your people. And I appreciate what you said of we're not looking to write citations for everything but correct behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that, right? And I haven't had a lot of interactions with people I've had in the past, and I brought that to your attention. Hey, I've heard people say they don't see you guys on the east side, or they don't see you outside of the downtown area. A perfect example of this is I was smoking a turkey on Thanksgiving over my brother's in the Knolls, and I was driving from my house to his, and there's one of your patrol cars running up through the Knolls. And so I've been seeing you guys in the parts of town where I hear, oh, I don't see that. And that's been great. So when we've given you feedback, you guys have listened to that. I know one of the concerns that we had was just with the new school opening. What was that going to look like? I'm just looking here. School checks are up. And I appreciate, even though we couldn't add a position, that you guys have taken upon yourselves to say, hey, can we be watching the traffic in this area? Can we be just driving by, checking on the schools? So I appreciate that you've really worked with us to kind of help address some of the concerns that we as a board have had. And I feel like you've addressed any of the issues that have been brought to me by residents, and they have not brought back those issues. And I very much appreciate the reports that you send us, because it's good to know like what's happening, what's going on in the town. So thank you.
I wish that we could share that with the rest of the town, just kind of a generalized, hey, this is kind of what we're doing out there. Because as I've said before, if you only occasionally see a patrol car drive by your house, you're like, these guys are never around. We are out there. You just don't see us, and we tend to try to focus on some of the areas that we have problems.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I thought was really cool when we got that update email today was that Corporal Baker is working with local auto parts stores to give coupons to people that have minor infractions like a taillight bulb out or a brake light or whatnot. So you get a coupon to get it fixed, I think that's awesome. I mean, your guys' community environment, everything that you were promoting from within and how we've seen it in our community is incredible.
Awesome.
One other thing, sorry, I wanted to share one other thing, and I won't go into the details of this, but I think it was a month or so ago in one of your reports you sent us, there was a situation, and it was a situation that you typically see. Someone's like, hey, I'm angry, I'm going to get a cop to kill me, that shows up on national news. And it was so great to see in that report. This is a situation we see on TV, and to hear that because of the training, the work that you guys have and desire to serve your community, it was all worked out to the good. And I want to, I know we can't tell everyone here's all the things that you do, but this is one of the things that I appreciate about having you guys serve as our law enforcement is you're not the guys that are just coming in trying to take everyone out, but you're seeing these situations saying, okay, how can we protect everyone we possibly can in the situation? And when it needs to happen, you need to happen. But you guys have just done a great job serving this community in ways that, like you said, a lot of times we don't see that, but I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just want to say, really appreciate the job that you guys do. I know Sergeant Sherry, you see me every once in a while, and we get to catch up every once in a while. So that's absolutely fabulous. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it for the holiday lunch this year, but I hope you guys have a great time and enjoy. So
I hope you do as well, because I won't be able to be there. So I'll be out of state. So, but I think you'll have a good time.
I want to say that I am extremely grateful for your guys' willingness to engage with all of the community. I would be one that says that I live on the east side and I see you guys regularly on the east side. The one thing that I could say, and maybe this is future, but it is the interactions at the parks and how we look at that through the summer breaks. I know it's not something, it's all you guys, but I would love to see if there was something we could pair with. I tried this summer, reached out to a few churches to see what we could do to get people rotating regularly in the main community park just to deter major damage and stuff like that. But I'm still going to try and pursue it. So FYI to churches that are looking to get youth involved, sports, football games, stuff like that, it would be amazing for us to see that. I know that's not totally an LCSO thing, but I think it would assist you guys in having to have those conversations when it's seen as a friendship instead of enforcement. I think you guys will have a better experience in general. I am very excited for the Hudson annual lunch. I was able to attend with Miss Garcia last year, and it was wonderful. I hope those who can attend have an opportunity to do so. I actually have some JROTC participants that are going to be accompanying me as well that are looking at careers in law enforcement after they leave their service. So I'm excited to be able to make that connection whichever way it goes. But no, I'm grateful and thankful for everything you guys do. And there's not a lot that I would change when it comes to your guys' communication. We see a lot more in email than what I think gets shared out and about. So I love to see the fact that these kind of things can be made public and people realize just how much you guys invest into this community, because we see a lot more than I think the public does. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
And if I could just touch on what you were talking about in the park, one thing that did not get in this late report is that one of the things that I've asked our K-9 unit to do is to do random sweeps of the parks, the playgrounds, those types of things, specifically the kind of the skate park, sniffing around for anything that might be illegal. And I was reassured that there was nothing in the last sweep. They don't do this when anybody's around. They'll just kind of do a quick sweep and look for anything that might be hidden. And so far, nothing. So I'm happy.
I want to thank you. I think the biggest thing with the police, law enforcement, is a safe community. And I think we do have, and our people do feel safe here. And really, really appreciate it. And I know a few of the municipalities around here the police are more of a revenue generating part of the economy. And I'm glad you're not. I mean, you guys should be out there. That way you're approachable, and you guys are. So I think you're doing a great job, and keep her up.
Appreciate all the very nice things. Sounds like we're on the right track. Again, if there's anything that we could be doing, should be doing, talk to citizens, please have them reach out to me so that we can get on that. We do take all those things very seriously. I'm not looking for kudos or anything like that, just some honest feedback as to how your sheriff's office is doing out there. Obviously, I got a ton of work. My corporal and I are going to have a ton of work at the beginning of the year to kind of get everybody up to speed on Wellington culture, what this town looks like, how supportive you are of them and what they're doing so that they can kind of understand what that vision is. And leadership is obviously going to be a huge impact on them going forward early on in the year. So thank you.
Thank you. Board reports. Trustee Mason. Trustee Daly.
One comment first, and then it's a very fun week in Wellington. So I'm going to go over a few events that are occurring. But the first thing I want to say is staff report earlier, in general, of course, I think our staff is amazing. I think we have very, very talented and skilled people. I think it's a family culture, and I love that. But what we need to also acknowledge is that public works impacts health and wellness and safety of our community as well. So we're not just talking about yay employees. We're talking about people who bring water to our homes. These are essential employees that need to not just say, hey, yeah, great, you're doing a good job, but we need to celebrate them. We need to be, we need to do everything we can to make sure they know that they're welcomed and we love them and we know how important they are to our town. Not only do they work here for a good career opportunity, but they work here because this is an amazing community to be in. So I want us to be more cautious in our discussions. We're a little flippant when we're talking about the value of staff and the value of the infrastructure of the people who run this town, who bring water to our homes. So I just want to make sure and put that reminder out that, for one thing, I appreciate you all so much. And I think we have amazing leadership. But we need to do better when we're talking about the most important part of our town, which is staff. So I just want to put that challenge out. So in these next discussions, budget's hard, money is a hard conversation, but never, never should we let that put into our language anything that devalues the work or function or people that run our town. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that I appreciate you. Our whole board appreciates you. These conversations are difficult, but we could do better. We should do better, and we all will do better in making sure that you understand that appreciation. Secondly, on Thursday, please join the Wellington Main Street program for their open house and annual dinner, where they will be celebrating their voted in Best Business of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, and also doing voting for new board members for next year. That's going to be at T-Bar on Thursday at 5. That's fun. I've never seen it as an open house before, so that'll be fun. I'm just going to show up. I don't know if I'm supposed to RSVP, but that was my RSVP. I will be there. On Saturday is a jam-packed day of things where you can support so many great organizations in our community. Start the morning with the bake sale for the senior center. And that is, I assume it's here. Yep, at the Leaper Center, starting at 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then head over for, the parade, Santa, blah, all the things. I had a list in front of me and I just closed it because I got upset about other things.
Santa 3, parade at 5.
Yep. Santa 3, parade at 5. And then after that, go over to the Wellington Middle High School and support FFA. They're doing a free chili, but it's also a fundraiser, so silent auction, all the fun things there too. So you can support old to young all in one day, also get to sit on Santa's lap. So I think it's a great day for Saturday in Wellington. So those are my updates. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Gator.
Yep. So wanted to bring to the board, this kind of came out of our conversation at Finance Committee. One of the things we talked about just with the financial situation that we're in, Mr. Rhoads had said that typically good practice is just kind of reviewed to kind of deep dive review twice a year, even when things are good. So like doing a review in like June. One of the things we talked about is it'd probably be a good idea for us to do quarterly, just knowing what is on the forecast, to be looking at that on a quarterly basis, because the last thing we want to do is be whatever road you go, right? Whether you go the road of we're going to cut everything back and prepare for the worst, if it turns out everything's coming in the best, then guess what? You can ease up a little bit. But at the same time, if we're preparing for a better situation and we're seeing circumstances worsen, you don't want to wait an entire year to another budget, because then you have to make more drastic changes. So that was a recommendation that I wanted to bring to the board. That's something we should probably look at quarterly. So obviously this board would look at that again in April, and then obviously the next board would have to make their decision as to whether to continue that. But I think it would be a wise thing for us to do, just knowing the things that we're dealing with and we have coming up. It should not be something that's looked at budget time. It should be looked at every quarter to say, okay, let's update the models. Where are we at? Are we ahead of schedule on buildings? Are we behind schedule? Where are expenses coming in? Just kind of have a real good view on that. So wanted to bring that to the board. If that's something we're open to doing, it was a good recommendation from Mr. Rhoads. Is his way of doing that is, again, it should be twice a year, even in good times. But if you're in a rough situation, you should probably be looking at it quarterly. So I think that was it. The only other question I had, and I don't know if you were finished, Ms. Garcia, we kind of moved into another report. I know in our previous budgets, we've always said this is our estimated revenue. Is that a problem for us to change that? Because we won't know what that revenue is going to be from the prop. I know it's not a huge difference.
Well, revenues are always our best guess.
Okay.
So
For an
we'll
interest, it doesn't
go on
matter.
ahead and make the reduction. We're going to
Okay.
reduce our revenue estimate by the 137. We'll
Okay.
implement the 150,000 in reductions that I've found. So
Okay.
hopefully it'll, we'll
Okay, I just didn't know I just didn't know if it mattered. So we don't need to wait for the county to give us the property taxes because it's just an estimate anyway. So if it's wrong, it's
correct.
okay. Perfect. That was it.
Thank you.
We can get that.
That was actually my other question.
Perfect.
Was to see if we even needed to wait till January or if I think it puts it more at ease with Miss Patty going into January, not looking at budget still in 2024. So I would like to give that as a New Year's gift to all of town staff that they're not walking into 2024, still going through budget.
Right.
Oh, we will always be going through budget.
Just Wiegand.
I did have the opportunity to visit the Longview campus with Larimer Behavioral Health. And it's a phenomenal program that they have there. So we're very lucky. I know it's a long way from Wellington, but before that opened, or it should be open, I think. No, it's getting ready to open, I believe. But before that, most of the people had to go over to Weld County. So it's going to be such a benefit for Larimer County. So I think they're going in the right directions. Hopefully down the road, I know they're talking about building another addition for the youth down there. So they got a lot of stuff planned. So I think they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I talked to you already.
Wellington Housing Authority yesterday made a change, just a slight verbal change in one of our ordinances, I guess you would call it, so that the no longer has to be reflected as a item for auditable for the town, changing how that works out. It was based off of the review of their attorney and us, and so that was done. It was quick and simple. So that's good news. I want to thank staff and everybody that took us on the tour of the water plants. Spent a good portion of their Saturday taking us around. So thank you to all of you. Everybody that's maybe watching at home, thank you for that. I think that's all I got. What do you guys look like you're pondering? Okay.
I got one thing to add too.
Go for
I
it.
do want to thank Bob and Meagan for letting us get out there to see the water plant and the wastewater. And that was phenomenal. And it was good to be able to crawl around there and get dirty with it all and talk to the people. So really appreciate what you guys are doing out there. Thank you.
It's kind of cool to think where we were crawling and walking around and standing. Not a lot of people are going to have access to that area here pretty quick. So it was neat to go down deep into the concrete pits and see where the town's funding is going. It's amazing. I will say the water plant has a pretty decent view over their new FAR facility with the lake and the mountains in the background. I will say maybe the wastewater got a little jinxed on that one as well too. But yes, thank you.
All right. No further business. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Clerk, make it a roll call,
Second.
please.
You gotta say, Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Daly,
Yes.
Trustee Mason,
Yes.
Teets,
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
Mayor Shosse.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I now adjourn the regular meeting, time being 8:54 p.m.